Charlie Washburn, Black, Trek, and Historic. Today on Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. But we are coming at you as we do every Tuesday, right here live from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 for some sanity, clarity, and the big picture and all things Star Trek. I want to thank these folks, we'll talk about that later, for having a hand in getting me to you. And look, it's as I look at the calendar, as I look at my watch, it's closing on the end of February. I've gone a whole month here without talking about something that you might not expect me to talk about, but we all should be. It's been around for a long time. Kind of came into focus last year. We are all carrying a lot of burdens right now, a lot of concerns and worries about everything. But one thing that the Band-Aid was ripped off of, that was a phrase I used last week. Here we got no new Star Trek to watch every week. So to debate about, some folks really like to hyper debate about it. But while we've got the dust settled, that's a good time to be a little introspective. I know I've been doing that here with all things Trekland the last week or two. I've been kind of quiet on social media. But it dawned on me that this week was my last chance by the calendar to, to talk about Black History Month. I know I don't want to shock anybody. I'm just a white guy here. And compared to a lot of our Gen Zers, I'm probably an old white guy. Wait, what are we going to do after Gen Z? Have Gen 0? Gen minus A? I don't know. But yes, Black History Month. Now, I don't want to say qualified. We have so many great voices, so many great faces now with YouTube. So many more discussions and conversations happening across the web, happening in fandom. Depending on where you are, what your local group is like, what your online family might be like, and all the places you hang out. I hope there have been some good discussions this last year. Even just, like I say, a white guy like me standing on the sidelines, trying to be helpful, be an ally. So many words, so many phrases. You know, the more we study anything, the more we get into anything, I don't care what it is, the more diverse, the more sophisticated, the more terminology comes out. So don't be put off by a whole plethora of new buzzwords. I know it can be funny at times. The bottom line here is don't be afraid to have your assumptions challenged. Most of all, as I say on everything, generational, racial, technical. Just don't get caught with your blinders up. You know, don't get caught in your rut. I think for most of us, especially if we're Star Trek fans, I'm hoping that it's mostly a case of having your blinders up. That's something that I try to guard against, but you can't help it. We're human beings. We can't be all end all. And so, don't be afraid to leave the door open to new thoughts, new ideas, young minds, Mr. Scott. But so what am I going to do? Call in a Black guest on Tuesdays Live to talk about? I am who I am. I am what I am. I've always been supportive. I've always thought that I was not perpetuating anything racial, and then yet anti-racist, but then and yet we dig down, we peel back the onion, we find all kinds of things. We find words, we find processes that we had no idea were rooted in something. And I don't just mean Black racism. I mean all people of color. That's the same way with misogyny. It's the same way with genderist issues. We shouldn't be afraid to embrace the new just because somebody has finally started looking and talking at it. And those with the privilege, those with the power, the pie is plenty big here. The challenge to status quo should not be that. There are so many status quo pretenders who deserve to be lifted up themselves and are trapped in this instance. Now look, we got awful deep here. I did have a topic posted. I did have a guy's name out front. We're not doing media here, so you're going to have to trust me on this. But in 2007, 20 years, 15 years after I had the chance to write the Next Generation companion, I had another chance working on the old StarTrek.com to talk about the 20th anniversary of Next Gen, then do a survey of who was around from from the roots days of Next Gen, way before we got to do the Trek Files now with Roddenberry, my podcast, way before looking at it through an all new, fresh, and very microscopic lens. Back in the day, 2007-ish, I had an assignment from StarTrek.com to do a 20th anniversary TNG look back at the roots, at the formation. And at the time, I was making a list and realized that a guy named Charles Washburn, if you didn't know him personally, had been part of the creative team on the original series and was part of that group that came back for at least the first out of the go gate part of TNG's formation that now we know so much more about. Over the years, we keep learning more about that dynamic. But in that little group that included Dorothy Fontana and David Gerald and Bill Tice and Bob Justman out of the gate for Next Generation was an assistant director named Charlie Washburn. Now, on top of everything else we're talking about now, about peeling back the onion layers and getting deeper into some of these issues that we're getting into now that's making some people uncomfortable, there's another truism that we live in a world where, despite the pandemic, everything is moving so fast, everything is new to some sub-generation every 5 or 6 years, much less 10. So yes, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I got to know Charlie Washburn, which was amazing. Now, Charlie was in the decline of his life. Charlie was an African-American man, a young man who grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, the South, very amiable. He's of that generation of African-Americans who made a career, made a success, pioneering in a, my God, overwhelmingly white world. And he got by being talented and hardworking and, yes, very amiable. A very cheerful guy. And you know he had to have endured a lot growing up. I got to talk to him a little bit about it when I got to meet him. Because what happened was I tracked him down to talk to him about the TNG roots, and I caught him at an interesting time. Now, regardless of race or creed, another social layer we're getting into right now is what's happening to our retirees. When I met Charlie, he had been long divorced, but he had 2 or 3 kids. I met him when he was moving from one apartment to a smaller apartment, living on his pensions. He had his industry pensions and his industry health insurance. Yay. Because he was increasingly being afflicted by kidney issues. And, spoiler alert, Charlie passed away in 2012, actually. And I had gotten to know him for 4 or 5 years before that. Just as his life was, becoming smaller and smaller, he wound up living out at we say the actor's home, but it was the industry home for retirees. He had a couple of good years out there. The other thing about Charlie was that on one hand, you could say he never gave up on his dreams. He came out, I'll just say this, he was the first Black African-American director to go through the Directors Guild of America's trainee program. If you watch the credits for almost any movie and many TV series, you'll see the listing for the DGA trainee. That's a program that the Directors Guild had to place up-and-coming directors, usually in a variety of places. With TV series, it was you get shopped around to several of them so you could pick up different, the ways different people, different crews did different things. Formats, sitcoms, dramas, whatever. Features. He was the first African-American in that. Now, I don't know about first assistant directors, but Charlie was the second assistant director, African-American assistant director in Hollywood. Charlie's historic. He didn't brag on that. He didn't care. He didn't wear it like a flag, but he has part of history. And I'll wrap that up in a minute. So in case you haven't noticed, this is my contribution to Black History Month. I blogged about this in 2012, when Charlie passed away in April. But as I said, it's been 9 years. A whole generation's come and gone. Who reads blogs anymore? This was on my legacy blog before we updated about 4 or 5 years ago. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Charlie. As easygoing a guy you would ever hope to meet. Always had the smile. So right away you get the idea, well, that's how he made it in a white man's world. And I say man. How many female directors, much less ADs, were out there? There were some. And Star Trek, to its credit, had them on Next Generation era. And if you want to see the battle of one woman to be a director who was totally competent to do so, and what she faced about 10 years before that, check out The Green Girl, the biography documentary about Susan Oliver and her battles to direct both a sitcom on MASH, good experience, and the hour-long Trapper John, bad experience, Sabotage by misogyny. But here's Charlie trying to make his way and climb that ladder. And a lot of assistants begin as assistants, seconds, then they work up to first, and they want to direct. A lot of assistant directors are totally happy to keep the wheels moving, right? Do the call sheets, handle the extras in seconds, handle the camera setups, handle the organization of the production, the shooting schedule, and so on that way. A lot of them, though, have the vision. They want to go on and direct. And Charlie was one that wanted to go on and direct. He directed a couple of short films for himself that he got together. But mostly he never did get that chance, but he never gave up dreaming. And you know what? He never grew bitter. That was not his way. He was very soft-spoken, very, he was just a smile. And you really get a sense of the generational time. He was an icon. He was somebody who made his way that way and never could break through that, glass ceiling for what he was trying to accomplish. He was not short on ideas. In fact, he kept his, what you would call research files with him till the end. In fact, you would say that basically by the time he was retired and here into his 70s, a hoarder, because the hardest thing about dealing with Charlie as his life was having to be, made smaller as he grew older, and his means still supported, but grew less, was that he had a lot to take with him. And he did not give up his treasures or his research files easily or gladly. And as someone who helped him move once or twice, and as someone who got some of one time I had a lot of LA fandom here in to help move him. He did not give that up easily or gladly. So it was a two-way street. But I was in a race to preserve as much of his history and legacy as I could. Charlie himself was writing a book, and he'd written 2 or 3 chapters, and he had done some interviewing with folks. He did an interview with Joe Pevney, the director, the original series director, before his dementia had set in himself. And he has some precious pieces. He wrote some chapters of his book. I hope someday to be part of maybe making that a thing. But one thing that Charlie didn't do a lot of as we talked was talk about, the racial battle to climb that ladder or to maintain where he was. He had nothing but good things to say about Star Trek. He was a trainee on Star Trek out of that program, but not exclusively Star Trek. He was a trainee on the last 8 episodes of original Batman. I was listening to the last recordings that I did with him last night. I'm going to share them with Portal 47. Long overdue to do that. But that he had all kinds of aspirations and dreams and several pitches. And the first I was first meeting him, he had contacts around the industry. He was getting illustrators to illustrate pitch packets to send out. He had some great ideas from history that deserved being illuminated with a movie, with a TV movie, with a series, with a mini series. Today, the formats would be so much out there. Today, in fact, I hadn't even thought about that. If Charlie was out there pitching today, the platforms and all of the movements that are so open to this, the diversity in not just casting and in crewing, but in storytelling, would really be on Charlie's side. I kind of mourn for that. But, he says when he came to Hollywood and when one of his DGA experiences was on Star Trek, by the way, which then hired him full time to be an alternating second director for the third season. He worked on all but the last 4 episodes of second season as the DGA trainee, and then third season. Even talking to me about how one of the ADs was aging in his 60s, was a year or two away from retirement, and Charlie was just the trainee, and was running around keeping track of everything on set, so that when Bob Justman or when Greg Peters came down to check on how things were going, are we running behind on stage, much less on location. Oh my God, talking about location for Friday's Child, that he had all the information. He had all the information so that I think it was Rusty Meeks. Anyway, the first AD, who was not as able, could rattle off what the status of every department, what the status of shooting schedule was. He would answer the phone on the Desilu stage. We've got a picture of this. And he would answer it and say, Charlie, Star Trek. And over time, that just got morphed into Charlie Star Trek. So you could say maybe that was a little bit of a, I don't know. Was that some people's idea of a Uncle Thomas, racist tinge thing? Or was that just purely an affectation? I'd like to think it was the former, since it was Star Trek. Charlie also told me one time, and this really gobsmacked me, but it's totally true. He said, when I came to Star Trek, there were 3 black people on the lot. There were 3 African Americans working on the lot. Him, Nichelle Nichols, and the guy who had the lunch coach, the roach coach, they call any of them, but the guy who had the lunch wagon, and then after lunch would close it and then shine shoes that afternoon. He said, you could count us on 3 on one hand. Now, since then, I've realized, and it's been, I didn't think about it at the time, and I should have asked him. I wish I'd been able to ask him about each other. But then the great Andy Richardson, now Andrea Kindred, who's been a guest at Portal 47, and I was thrilled to have live at LA one night, who was the assistant for Gene Kuhn. You may have read about her in some of the earlier books. There's some badly misquoted stories there, but she was actually on the lot as well, working in the offices, not where Charlie was. I've been thinking the last year or so, for all that Charlie was able to accomplish and be honored, and yes, when he passed away the next year, because of the blog obituary memorial I wrote to Charlie, somebody who was the vendor providing the memorial reel for the Oscars that year, some of you may remember this if you go back with me that far, saw that and saw him being the first DGA, the first black in the DGA program, the first black second assistant director in Hollywood. Called me up to get some imagery. I put them in touch with his family. We all contributed a couple of images, and Charlie was in the memorial reel for the Oscars that year, which is pretty astounding considering that was right in the Oscars So White time. That was wonderful. And Oscars starting to honor some of the other crafts and fields like assistant directors, when people were truly historic and contributed something to the industry, beyond just the big names. And now you've seen a diversity in titles and guilds and creative fields in the memorial reel, as well as just some more unheralded names like that. And I was thrilled to be able to do that. Charlie's book deserves to be finished. Charlie deserves to have his story told. I have a little bit recorded. There's, there's more to go on there. The sad thing was that he passed away when I had not been in touch with him for about 3 months. He had been fine the last time I talked to him. I was counting on doing some more of these things with him. And this was 2012, guys. YouTube and the fallow years were very much in effect then. We had no idea what was happening. We were Into Darkness was about to come out. That's the state of Star Trek at the time. That was the state, we did not have the flowering and the diversity of fandom and all the media platforms and diversity that we have now, the bloggers, much less the YouTubers, much less some of the social currents that have been rocking this world for the better. The rubber band held at tension is going to snap back much faster than one that's relaxed. And a lot of that's for the good. It's upsetting. It's uncomfortable. There is some collateral damage along the way, but don't say that it's not warranted. But Charlie himself was a gentle soul who would have not wanted a big fuss. He would not want a big, he just would have liked to have had some of his projects considered. One of them was, it was, I forget what it was called, but it was about a black fraternity in a historically black college in the 40s, 50s, I believe. It was probably mirroring his own life. But Charlie always had nothing but good words to say about everybody and anybody. He was part of the generation that if you didn't have something good to say, you didn't say anything. And that's what kept him alive. And I mean physically, but also flourishing in a career when he was. And, as soon as he got here, within 2 or 3 or 4 years, he got to work with Sidney Poitier. He saw the flowering. He saw the relevancy come to Hollywood. The first wave that was trying to react to the civil rights movement of the 60s translate into what that looked like in media in the late 60s, early 70s. He saw that first wave. He benefited from that to a bit, but he never got really to break beyond that aspiration and see some of his many, many ideas contained in folders and clippings with the research for them that, he kept tight about it. Maybe that's why, hoarders, not to be cruel, but hoarders, there's always something emotional about that. And maybe for Charlie, it was the fact that those were his dreams, not just, dreams, but the dreams he had very concrete industry connections, worked for many, many people. Ageism is a factor. Yes. You get past 50, no one's listening to your ideas unless you've been very lucky and got a good food chain. But no one's listening to your ideas when you're 55 or 60 or 65 if you have not had a track record before, no matter what color you are. But even more so if you're black. I would have loved for some of the black pioneer forces in production now to have gotten a hold of some of Charlie's ideas. Maybe that will still come to pass. Who knows? But yeah, little old white me trying to throw my 2 cents and help out with some little voice here, like it needs me, but feeling like there is a reason. And listen, one more thing here. Black History Month, Black Lives Matter. A lot of people get uncomfortable because they feel like it's singling out, one of anybody. Oh, all lives matter. Blue lives. I mean, the fact that we have special days, we have commemorations, usually for one reason, sometimes two. One is life's complicated. There's a lot of stuff to keep up with. There's a lot of shit to keep up with too. Hopefully it's just stuff. Hopefully it's a lot of stuff. And yeah, we have holidays. We have Arbor Day to remember to go plant a tree. But you should plant a tree all year long, no matter when you have the chance. But we single out a day to do that. One time Will Rogers did a whole routine about who got a day and who got a week and who gets a month. Why do mothers only get a day? But they should have all 365. So yeah, you can talk about months, days, weeks, anybody fighting for recognition. Is it crass? Is it commercial? Or is it Hallmark trying to sell more cards? You be the judge. But the other reason we have to keep something on our radar, at least for a blip of time, day, week, month, is that maybe we're trying to correct a deficit. If we have Cancer Awareness Month, if we have Breast Cancer Awareness Month, that's not to say that none of the other cancers are worth curing. That's not to say that all the other diseases aren't worth curing and aren't serious and afflict people and, yes, kill people. But many times we have days, weeks, months, movements to address a deficit, to try to get that deficit, deservingly so, up to even par with everything else. Sometimes that's attention. Sometimes that's awareness. Sometimes that's understanding. Sometimes that's clawing for a legal footing. So yeah, I'm not offended. I don't feel less than by Black Lives Matter or anybody else's movement when there is an actual agreed upon deficit. And someone is trying to make that right. We all deserve an even ground. We all deserve to get the point where Uhura can say, I'm not offended by the word negress because in our time, you know, that's not important to me. Quoting Savage Curtain there from the original series. So it's every 10, 15 years, we see Star Trek through new eyes. And there's been so much great commentary this month, the last year. It's amazing how the pandemic, as we said, has ripped the Band-Aid off so many, healthcare, social standing of everyone, lower income people, our Brits call them key people, but our essential personnel, and how they don't get paid anything like that. Some of these things, you know, the disasters have a way of opening our eyes. Disasters also have a way, shock doctrine, disaster capitalism. Disasters also have a way of allowing the manipulators and the take advantage, those who can easily take advantage, to do it even more or shift something. But hopefully, in a lot of crises, we have eyes open and we can see things. Now, I am going to get to the chat, guys. I hope I've ripped a Band-Aid off of some discussion topics here. Maybe some things made somebody uncomfortable. I don't know, but we are Star Trek here. And as much as I've seen some baffling things come out of the mouths of Star Trek fans, not just now, not just 2 years ago, you know, since the late 80s. And as much as we try to, whether you talk about it being a big tent or you talk about it being idic, Star Trek was the show where after a couple of pilots, it's amazing to me also to watch the debate around the casting of Strange New Worlds. People already worrying about it being too white with the 3 leads that we do know of, knowing that there are 4 or 5 more coming. I'm just wondering, would you rather recast those roles? Well, they've already been on screen now. If you're going to recast actors that you've seen in Discovery is kind of the backdoor season pilot-ish spinoff. But are we going to recast those characters and have people scream about violating canon? I mean, we've already got Yeoman Colt being an alien now. Do we really want to? Which is kind of, yeah, okay. All that aside, yeah, the commentary, the voices, just raising issues is part of what Star Trek is about. And good on it. We got nothing else to do right now. It's not exactly as if there's a competition for attention. We are doing this. I'm getting a lot of business stuff and a lot of content and a lot of archives straightened up in this fallow time and trying to pay attention to what's going on as things go by, because there's a hell of a lot going by right now in the real world that our future Star Treks coming down the pike here, again, no pun intended, that whether that will be part of the DNA of the arcs of Discovery Season 4 or Picard Season 2, which we're already way along, or Strange New Worlds, which has been along in the last year, Section 31 to come, Prodigy already on. It may be the actual next unannounced series to come that embraces some of these issues that have been come to the fore just the last year or so. Whatever that is, it's happening. But just because we don't have new Star Trek now is no reason not to jump in now. And so, yeah, I did not want to let Black History Month get by without sharing someone who we were talking big time about 10 years ago, 9 years ago. But as I said, attention spans are small. We've had a whole generation of fandom come into the fold. And I wanted to let you all know about my buddy, late in life, but my buddy of about 5 years, Charlie Washburn, what he accomplished, what he wanted to accomplish, what I am sad to think he might have accomplished had he lived 20 years later. But had he lived 20 years later, he wouldn't have the distinction of breaking the color barrier that he did in the time that he did, and worked so many places with so many people and been pretty much happy with his life. He would have loved to see some of his own projects come to fruition, but he got to work with an amazing, amazing a lot of people. If you want to find out what I wrote about him, if you just look up Trekland Charlie Washburn, I'm sure it will take you to my old 2020 blog posts. Some of his photos. He was buried back in Memphis. He was 73 when he passed, too early. Again, he'd been battling some kidney disease. I may have been in line for a transplant. I'm not sure about that. But I was totally gobsmacked when I had gotten busy, had done some con trips, was out of town a little bit, and learned just in the last 2 or 3 months that I last seen him that he passed. We were shooting in Houston on the Con of Wrath when I got the news. And he shared a lot. And so I've got interviews with him. Other people have interviews with him too. He is on one set of original series DVD interviews, if you want to dig those out. Yeah, I'm just very pleased for the time I had with him. I think of how many others in the industry of color who had dreams like that too and didn't get there. I think of the shoulders they're standing on as others like them are trying to make their progression now. Some of them doing a bang-up job of it and have the opportunities that those like Charlie pioneered and may not even know how to thank him or the allies that Charlie had on his quest. Anyway, that's it, guys. Just look up Charlie if you can. See something about him, read something. You might even find a photo I took of him. And some of the programs, even at the Actors Home, he was able to arrange. Some of the film nights he was able to arrange and put together of service in his last years too. Anyway, R.I.P. Charlie. I got to thinking about you again. So I hope everybody's doing fine. Look, as I said, if you're with us on YouTube, that's going to pretty much wrap it up here. A couple of reminders, though, first. And if you're with us live or on Facebook, hang on. We'll get there after the break. We'll get right to the Parrot Analytics USA Top 10 and some streaming insights. And then, yes, I will get to the chat. I can't wait to see. We'll be re-rolling and re-scrolling, so be patient with me, as always. But I will be interested to see anything I've conjured up today, okay? So yes, most of all, I want to do a shout out those who helped make today possible. All of our TTL Club on Patreon: Blaze K, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne-Marie Siegel, Blake Arledge, Justin Porteous, and Nathaniel Robinson. And hey, our live wires, who get a shout out and a little more too: Rusty Harold, Jared Cooper, Halbjord, Gun Johnson, Eli Irvin, Jalen Bullock, Gary Williams, Robert McLean. I'm going to fix this sign someday. Dan Leckie and Casey Shafsky. Thank you guys very much. If you want to help out too and grow the power of Trekland here, I have a very simple Patreon, patreon.com/TreklandLive, just a $5 and $10 a month. We have so many other projects going. I didn't want to make this elaborate, but yeah, a shout out every week and $10 access. I need to do this access to our earlier generation of Portal 47 guest night interviews with behind the scenesers. Charlie passed away in 2012. I did not get to have him as a live guest on Portal 47, which we're now in our coming down on 6 years. But we do have recordings. I have a little video with him and a lot of audio recordings, and you can bet that those are saved. But elsewhere this week, guys, Saturday, Life Support Live is every Saturday with Dr. Ollie and I going boldly in uncertain times, Star Trek through a mental health lens, right? Or mental health through a Star Trek lens. We geek out one way or the other. And our great lifer community. This Saturday is a double whammy. We're going to do another watch along, bring your own media. But after the watch along, we're going to have two guests, my friend Lolita Faggio and Dave Zappone. They're working on the Voyager documentary. Dave did What You Left Behind, the DS9. They're right now letting the world know that they're about to unleash an Indiegogo fundraiser for a chunk of the funding for the new Voyager documentary coming down. Voyager got cheated on the pandemic year. Didn't get a full 25th anniversary celebration. The doc is one way that's going to be preserving that. So join us live. We will have the chat. In the second hour, they'll be with us and taking questions, just like right now. So everywhere you're watching me right now, that's where you can watch Life Support Live every week. But most of all, spread the word. Tell your neighbor. Tell all your fan friends that we're going to have this great special this Saturday. We'd love to see you there. And of course, speaking of Lolita is my guest again for a second week on the Trek Files. So look for that wherever you get your pods. The file of the week or 2 or 3 is with us on Facebook at the Trek Files. Okay. And just a quick shout out for our subject last week. It's still there. There's a Friends of Michael Braveheart GoFundMe. Go find that. This is an old capture. We've moved the needle up a little bit on his very modest goal. So if you can go throw $5 or $10 at Michael, who was Ensign Martinez, Dr. Crusher's non-speaking nurse through all the years before Nurse Ogawa was there to say lines when need be. And he was there all through First Contact. Got promoted to lieutenant by the end of it. That's there too. Guys, I'm going to take a break here just to know that if you're watching on YouTube, hey, that's my Twitter handle, simply Larry Nemecek. Larry Nemecek's Trekland on Facebook. That's my Instagram. And yeah, portal47.net. We had a 24-hour special last week, so stay tuned. Maybe we'll have another one. You can mini-con with us all year long in the portal. Got a lot of portales on here today, so that's it for today. I will take a break. I'll be right back after the break. YouTubers, you should watch us live some week on Tuesdays at 1 Pacific-ish, 4 p.m.-ish Eastern, etc., etc. But for now, guys, hey, we're not out of the woods yet. Stay healthy. Do all the smart stuff, okay? Stay woke. Check your sources for all the news. Make sure the news, the links, and even the people you're interacting with, make sure they're real, would you? Most of all, trek well, everybody.